Alright, well, what we're looking at here is the ABS harness, wheel speed sensor harness, however many names you want to give it when you're searching online. 2005 Saturn, just like everything else, going to be similar to Uplanders and Montanas and Rendezvous and whatever else you've got out there. You can see I've already broke open the existing clips that hold this wire in place. Here is the top of the plug. You can see where I have the old wire sticking out here. It's been crimped together because one of a million reasons why I never should have bought this van. Somebody at some point, for whatever reason, this wire had gotten cut, damaged. They replaced the wheel bearing assembly, something. They just put wire nuts on it, put it back together. That's good for about a week till it gets wet, and then the weathering screws up your resistance readings, your ohmage, whatever. And you're always getting errors in the computer. Anti-lock brakes don't work correctly. They engage when you don't want them to. So, we'll get past all that. Wheels off, car's jacked up, make sure your parking brake's on, all the usual stuff. These clips are a little difficult to get loose. You kind of have to force them off. There's no easy way to say it. Whatever this design is, it's not user-friendly when it comes to removing. They're not at all where they should be. If they faced this direction, that would have been a whole lot better. But because they don't put them on, assuming anyone's ever going to take them off, it kind of oriented the wrong way. I'm going to take all of these out because the new wire that you see down here comes with some new fittings, so why not? For the most part, they match up. One thing to make note of before we get too far, this tells you, since this is more than likely not going to match the colors on your car, this is a almost safety green yellow wire and a dark blue for the other. The light from my camera takes away from some of that. But this little paper here tells you green's going to go to yellow, tan's going to go to blue, which is the way this works in my case. The existing wiring does not match yellow and blue. So, what we're going to do, work our way up in here, put a screwdriver behind this, and this just has tension on these threads from the engine block, side of the transmission, whatever the heck we're looking at. Pry that off, it'll take a second, and if we take a peek right here, you can see where this all wires back into the system. We're going to come down really as far as we can. I'll probably zip tie this so there's however much extra up in this, because I'm afraid one day I'll have to do this again. But we'll keep the connection up in here instead of down exposed behind the brake where it gets wet and salty and snowy since it's winter time. So for now, that's as far as we're going to go with that. Maybe no, this shroud here, when you get underneath, this is going to sit up in here like this. These tabs slide in behind this to hold it in place, and you're going to get that off by removing these. Use a flathead, a pair of needle nose. You want to remove what looks like the nail here, because that's what puts the tension on the anchor. Pop this out, and then you can pry the rest out from this washer head. That was kind of difficult itself, so give yourself some time for that. But you get that out of the way, and you're ready to cut into this wiring casing and start installing the new. Alright, it's a little awkward for me, so I can't tell where I'm going here. Almost. Alright, now you're going to notice this bright yellow seal is good and fresh, so it will be a little difficult to get it to fit the wiring harness just right so this pops in place well. There we go. Nice good click. Hopefully you can see that, because I can't watch this camera while I'm doing this. Gonna route this up through here. Alright, and the important thing here is to make sure that you don't pull this so tight that when you steer all the way to the left and all the way to the right, you start tugging on the wire. So what we're going to do, I'm going to try to shift these plastic brackets, anchors, whatever you want to call them, a couple of inches further down the line so that I know I got plenty of slack here. And that'll help me out later, because I want to leave as much as I can over in here where my connections are. Alright, so here we've got our new connection in. A little bit of slack for the steering. Got our first clip. Second clip. Third, fourth, and the fifth. And the fifth one is a slightly different kind of anchor, just so you're aware of that. I had to tap it a little bit harder to get it to sit just right. You'll see what I mean when you're doing this. But to save yourself some headache, you may just want to reuse the existing clips if you can get the old wire out without damaging them. This was unnecessarily difficult to do. Anyway, alright, I cut mine, let's say about 6 to 8 inches away from this anchor up here. This is actually a zip tie, so unless you buy a new fitting, you're not going to be able to reuse that. And you don't really have any room to work up in this, so I gave myself just enough to get out of the way. You can see the actual wrapping around the two wires we're going to connect into. We're going to get those snipped off. For now, I'm going to leave this just as it is, so there's plenty of slack to work with. What I've been warned you can run into with the sensitivity of this measuring the resistance it generates, any difference in the length of wire or the type of connection can cause issues, but I'm going to do this safe and make sure I'm not using too little before I use too much. I think I said that right, you get me. So I'm going to run this up in here. I'll put a couple wire ties around these two fittings, show you the connection I'm going to use versus the crimps that come with it here. Alright, these little guys right here, which these are branded modular devices. There's one branded Dolphin, if they're still around. I installed security systems for a long time. We use these on all of our low voltage connections, and these things are great. Don't take much pressure to crimp. On the inside, which you're never going to be able to see with my flashlight on, you basically have a bunch of little metal teeth. So in theory, you're not even supposed to have to strip these wires. You could leave that insulator around it, and those will bite through and grab the copper, and just one less thing to worry about. But nonetheless, we're going to take our handy wire strippers here, get these ends cleaned off with enough to work with, and set these guys up. Alright, here we are. You can see the new wire is the blue and yellow. The old is green and yellow. The paper, or the tag that came attached to this, talked about hooking up different colored wires accordingly, but didn't really say anything what to do if it was green or yellow. So, alright, what I guess could be a faded blue is connected to the much brighter blue, and the yellow to the yellow. So we'll get our little crimp put on here. And one thing I'll say, what we've always done and like to do, I know some of the guys I work with, they'll just put two wires together side by side, throw a wire nut on, and assume they'll hold. It's always nice to braid these together before you use your connection. So these slip right over the top. Get those in place. Sometimes twisting them can get them all the way down. Use your crimping tool, squeeze it a few times, get it nice and flat. Cool thing about these is if you haven't crushed them when you initially put them on, you can squeeze them from the sides and the teeth will let go and they can be removed again. So I'm going to crimp this up. I will wrap some electrical tape around it real good, try to keep it from getting too weathered too quickly. Bolt things back up on the housing, get our wheel on, and we will hopefully be rid of all of our ABS faults. Alright, wire's all on. I reset the computer, taking the battery terminal off. You may want to try that too, always a good idea when you have to clear out check engine or anything else. Now typically, by the time I back out of my driveway and hit the first stop sign, my light will come back on. So let's see where we make it. Well, I'm at the first stop sign. And at least for now, looks like everything's back to normal. Alright, so if for some reason you have come across a similar issue, you got to replace that wire, you're a little bit the wiser.